Good evening from Rocky Mountain PBS. I'm Cynthia Hessin. This is Colorado's State of Mind. An $18.5 million plan to boost Colorado's mental health system. That was the announcement by Governor John Hickenlooper on Tuesday this week. The proposal is meant to give better access to help and to improve the state's crisis response system by establishing a single statewide mental health crisis hotline and building 5 24/7 walk-in crisis stabilization services for urgent care. Tonight we're going to talk about all this with Dr. Hildegard Messenbaugh, founder and medical director of Third Way, a mental health treatment center for troubled teens. And also George DelGrosso, director of the Colorado Behavioral Health Council, which is the membership organization of 17 community mental health centers, 5 behavioral health organizations, 2 specialty clinics in Colorado, and also 4 managed service organizations. We will sort out what all of that is shortly. Along with the nation, Colorado is reeling from the deadly shooting spree in Newtown, Connecticut a week ago today. And that's why the Hickenlooper administration thought it time to reveal a plan they say they began considering immediately after the Aurora shootings last August. Here is more of what the governor had to say in his news conference.
After the shootings in Aurora, we said we wanted to allow the victims and their families to, the wounded victims to process what had happened to them, and the families to grieve with some level of peace the loss of their family members and their closest friends. But we began looking at what things could we do. The key here to recognize is that we're never going to have a fail-safe system. What we're looking at is how do we increase the probability that we can keep those who are suffering some form of mental illness from being a danger to themselves and to others. We're lucky to have many high-skilled providers and a strong infrastructure already in place. But we know that access to services at present is insufficient, and that oftentimes the delivery of those services is fragmented. We're very well aware that resources for mental health services have declined over the last few years, but really for a longer period of time than that. Certainly now more than ever, we need to have tough discussions about how to enhance our systems and to improve the safety of all Coloradans.
As the governor said, the first component of this plan is to ensure that the right services are being provided to the right people at the right time. We propose aligning 3 statutes into one new civil commitment law for the state of Colorado. This alignment will protect the civil liberties of people experiencing mental health crises or substance abuse emergencies, while clarifying the criteria and process for providers of mental health and substance abuse services and law enforcement. The second component to the involuntary commitment criteria is language that we propose adding to include substantial probability of physical harm to our new law. It will give professionals, law enforcement, and the courts more discretion to intervene when there is a substantial probability that someone may be a danger to themselves or to others.
What we're trying to do is build a system that will be effective, but at the same time build a system that's efficient. That we're not just going to throw tens of millions of dollars at this. We wanted to really look at where, for each dollar you spend, where do you get the maximum benefit. This seemed, in terms of what is the most likely to increase the level of safety in the state, these seem like the best investments. Mental illness seems like the one point that's not controversial. Certainly there'll be discussions and a thorough analysis, but it connects almost all of these terrible tragedies.
One of the things we're all grappling with is that statistically, we're told, an occurrence like Newtown is rare. But it doesn't feel that way, especially here in Colorado, the scene of 3 mass shootings in the past 15 years. Columbine in 1999, Aurora this year, and in 2007 when a gunman killed 4 people in 2 locations at the Youth with a Mission Center in Arvada and the New Life Church in Colorado Springs. Dr. Messenbaugh, I would really like to start with you. Is there something different now in the 21st century about the incidence of violent behavior due to mental health problems?
Yes, I think there's something very different about it, and one of them is that our diagnostic process is not terribly good, and that we have not really looked at what the statistics of these people, I say people, is because they're not people. This is a very small percentage of the population. They're mostly young men between the ages of 15 and 25. And we talk a lot about guns, and we talk a lot about mental illness, both of which go along with that. So those are the 3 things that they all have in common. Guns, that they're young men, but they're mostly young men. They're not, and we say people all the time. They're not people, they're young men.
No, we really have not
and
heard of young
they're young
women
men
doing
who have
this.
a mental illness. They have, I think, probably a very specific mental illness, which we have been loath to diagnose for a long time, which is paranoid schizophrenia. We're very afraid to call it that. I was trying to think back myself, when was the last time we diagnosed a paranoid schizophrenic? And it's been a long time since we've done that. I think part of the problem is that paranoid schizophrenia, or paranoia in general, is an extremely difficult illness to treat. When I got out of medical school, it was very easy to commit anybody or force them to take medications. It has become nearly impossible to do so. And if you have that kind of illness, it's impossible to treat them with the climate that exists at this point, which requires long-term treatment, requires probably court-ordered treatment, which we don't do anymore, and probably requires some kind of commitment, which we can't have anymore either.
So this is quite a, as you say, a different system that you're describing
It's
that
an
has changed over
incredibly
these
different
years.
system and the system, I'm now old enough to remember, you know, the entire gamut from when we started out knowing something about mental illnesses in the first place. I think the 60s when I graduated from medical school, which was a very long time ago, and then finally to now. We've come a long way, and we do have such wonderful drugs, and we have such wonderful medications that we've discovered since then. But as we have done that, and more people have gotten treatment, I think that certain illnesses, like paranoid schizophrenia, for example, have not been treated adequately. So we have a group of people, young men particularly, who are prone to that. We have an age of violence in which these young men are allowed to play a lot of video games. I had an interesting conversation with a 16-year-old girl yesterday in which she said to me, you know, it occurred to me that my brothers and I both played a lot of video games, violent video games, and I'm not violent, and they are.
Wow, that's a great observation.
Which is, a 16-year-old girl made that observation. And her other observation was that these people all were young males and that they were mostly white and that there were very few minorities involved. So if we were to develop a system to treat these people, I think we ought to consider the demographics before rushing out to total gun control, to just a blanket mental health system that is going to address and everybody. I think we ought to address it specifically to the population that is in danger right now, and I think it's our young men.
Let me turn to George DelGrosso. In the plan that Governor Hickenlooper and you were there for the news conference as this was laid out the other day, it seems like that might be, to some extent, in opposition to what Dr. Messenbaugh is saying, because it is designed to help everyone, isn't it?
It really is, but I think it's very important before we get started here is that even with the amount of money and the opportunity that the governor is encouraging to bring forward, there is still a huge amount of unmet need. The governor in his talk yesterday and in discussions I've had with the staff and whatever, they're really trying to focus on where can we take money in a state that doesn't have a whole lot of resources right now, and where can we focus to try to make a difference for the general population. We've worked together with their office, as well as they've gathered a significant amount of information, and so the focus of the areas that they're looking at are going to be very, very helpful to us, but it will not take care of the overall need. And I just want to give an example there where the crisis response that the governor has moved forward is definitely needed. We surely don't want people that are in a crisis situation not to have a place to go, or if law enforcement intervenes, that they don't have a place to take somebody. At this point in time, it's usually in an emergency room, and there's often a log jam and such, and so we really want to make sure that there is a place for people to go and to stabilize and to assess and see what their further needs are. But that's sort of where the problem still lies, is that we're going to have to continue to work on. So once we have identified, once we have stabilized, now what do we do in order to try to be able to help?
That's really the point. I don't think that we have any system that is long-term enough to help these very seriously chronically ill people. I treat young men by the dozens. They have increased, the number of them has increased so much so that even though we're a co-ed facility, we've had to convert one of our facilities into an all-boys facility because the pressure and the numbers of young men who are entering the system and entering the system with major mental illness has become so large that they have sort of crowded out, do you know what I mean, everybody else in many ways. Yes. And the problem is that after 18, there are no services for these people. Well, kids.
I have two comments that, if I might, and I think one of them is that the funding that has been available, and we end up talking about money, but in the area of mental health, money are staff, the resources for people to provide care. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the funding has really focused more and more towards those who are seriously mentally ill. I've been in the field also for a long time, and I've seen that happen. I think there's more potential for early intervention and for prevention and working together with folks than what we have been doing over time. But I want to warn us in something, and that is that we are seeing cases where there are people that potentially have mental illness. I'm not there to diagnose them, but I'm going to assume that that's there, and that they may not have gotten the care they need, or were getting the care they need and didn't follow through with it, or whatever that might be. But I think I am not on the same page as that we are not serving and helping people. The real change in this career field has to do with recovery. When I first got started in this field, people stayed, if they had serious mental illness, they stayed at the mental health center for basically forever. And we have really moved towards more of a way of helping people to recover and to become more productive members of our society and really involved. And we serve over 120,000 people a year through our community mental health centers. Not all of them are seriously mentally ill by any means, but the point being that we are seeing radical recovery. But the problem is that on some of the very extreme and complicated cases, it's very difficult, and when I say cases, pardon me, it's situations, that it's sometimes very difficult to follow through all of the way. And the doctor is she is very true that, we did have a lot more flexibility years ago in order to be able to intervene as a therapist. But as people have gotten more into recovery, they're also more concerned about their civil rights. Mm-hmm. And who is going to put me on a register? And for here on out, I'm branded as somebody who has a serious mental illness. And so it's a really fine balancing act. And the governor, in his discussions yesterday, I was so proud of him to say, we've got to have this discussion. Well, my friend here to the right, we've been around a lot of discussions over the years. And I want to say that I would like to see these discussions move towards action. I believe the governor's approach is towards some action. It's not everything. We need to support it, we need to build off of it, but there's a lot more work to do. And I think several of us are saying, hey, we want to roll up our sleeves and see what we can do to try to improve in Colorado, and we can.
So one of the things that strikes me is that another thing that has changed in these 40 years is the way we have become much less connected to people. Families don't live together in the same proximity anymore. You know, people just can be isolated if they want to, and I believe that's one of the symptoms that you list on the Third Way website is isolation. So my point is, are people not coming into contact with enough people who could say, you need some help?
No, they come into contact with people who say you need help all the time. It is getting them steady help and not making it a revolving door. The problem is that the way it is set up now, it is a revolving door. I can get a kid in crisis to Children's and who provides wonderful crisis work. They're terrific. But what happens is it truly is a revolving door. You may get help for a period of time, do you know what I'm saying? And then you get discharged, or you drift away, or which is what these children do. Or children, they're young adults. These young adult men particularly, they drift away. And then everyone in their community, in their neighborhood knows how dangerous they are and how scary they are and how they have given warning signs over and over and over again. But no one seems to know what to do about it. I mean, the neighbors don't know what to do about it. The families come to us and say, what am I going to do? I mean, what do you do with a 6'2" young man who says he's going to kill everybody? And I see dozens of these. We treat kids up to the age of 21, and I see lots of kids who do that. And who are violent and break things and threaten people and who have beaten up other people and have shown all the signs that this is going to be a problem.
And what are all the warning signs? I mean, obviously violence and breaking things and so forth, but are there other things you look for?
It's hard to tell with our culture of violence, in which we allow people, and this is a culture of violence. It is a culture in which I have 5-year-old, take histories from 5-year-old children who are allowed to see movies that would make my hair curl. That would keep me up, you know, probably for 3 days. But I'm a scaredy cat, so, you know. But it would, is that not true? And allowing to play those video games that are absolutely astonishing, we have lots of studies to show how desensitizing they are to people, and how they desensitize people to violence and to violent acts. And then you witness a lot of violence, because there's a lot of domestic violence that is one of the contributing factors. And you add that all onto a mental illness, and you have a brew that is particularly, you add testosterone to this, I hate to say that, but you add testosterone to this, and you have a terrible mix.
Well, I think this is really fun, and to have this discussion in this way, though it's very, very serious, because you know, what's been stated already today has to do with males and such, but we have also seen a tremendous increase in females in violence. And also, we're not seeing them in the shootings, and goodness only knows if that's where it will eventually progress or regress.
I hope we don't catch up with.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Do.
But I think that it's important that, look, all of us, everybody that lives in the community, to us as professionals, to whatever we're saying, what are the key pieces that we need to change, and do we make a difference? It is a multiple approach that needs to take place, but we cannot let the fact that it is a multiple approach stop us from finding out areas where we can make a difference.
Yes.
That's all I know how to do when I see something so tragic that we've experienced here in Colorado. I live just east of Longmont. We had a shooting yesterday in our community out there. This is around us. It's very scary. We need to get out on the table. We need to talk about it and take proactive, very concerted efforts to move forward. We can't go back. We can try to learn from the past. We can only look forward. And I'm determined, and I really believe that my organization is very committed to how can we take these terrible things and try to make something good out of them. And I'm sure determined to try to do that.
One thing that we can't deny is that the gun issue interfaces with this in terms of what we want for a background check when people buy a gun. Is there a way to give more information to the people who are selling guns about the person who's trying to buy one?
Well, that's what is in the governor's plan, and I happened to be fortunate to be a part of that unveiling yesterday in a couple of different venues. And right now, there is a requirement that people who have been committed, have to be on a register. And what the governor is proposing is that this register now, they send us a disc in every 6 months. It's also important to know that as somebody recovers and is doing much better, that they can be taken off of that list. And that also goes in every 6 months. And what they're promoting is to do something more in real time. And I think that that does make sense. You need to deal with it right when something's happening. So, for example, if I've just been committed and the next day I'm going down to, I get out, I'm going down to buy a weapon, that if we did it in real time, that hopefully a gun dealer would be able to pick that up. At the same time, if I am doing better, and I've met a lot of people over the years who have been very, very distraught, we're quite concerned about, but over time with the right kind of interventions and some of the strengthening of themselves, they've been able to do a whole lot better, and I have a concern about them losing their civil liberties. So I like the idea that there's a chance for people to sort of get off that. My problem is that we want to focus on guns and we want to focus on mental illness, and I think we do have to have those discussions. But what we're talking about today is much broader in all of society.
Go ahead.
Well, I think we talk a lot about guns and we talk a lot about mental illness. What we don't talk about is that these are young males, and that males need a different approach than females do, and young males need a different approach than old males. We don't talk to young males the same way as we do to old guys. We don't talk the same way to women as we talk to men. The mental health needs of women, young women, is very different than the mental health needs of middle-aged women or old women, just like the mental health needs of young men is very different. I would like to see more discussion about the mental health needs of young men in that mix, and not just constantly talk about guns and mental health, but to talk about the fact that this is a very specific male, young male problem at the moment that is threatening our society and seems to be threatening it increasingly more frequently.
I want to make mention of the 2011 Youth Risk Behavior Survey of Colorado high school students, which was done by the Colorado Department of Health and Environment, in which they got responses from, I don't know, about 1,500 teens, and grading them according to whether they felt sad and hopeless for more than 2 weeks, those who had considered attempting suicide and so forth. And, it's a set of numbers, but from your point of view, all these young men that you're treating, what percentage are they of all kids? Because we know not all kids have problems.
No, but, it's not unusual for adolescents to think of suicide. That is sort of an existential experience when you become an adolescent. Very few adolescents don't think of suicide or don't think of violence. So it's not that in itself that is dangerous and abnormal, because it isn't. That is well within normal limits. Once you learn that in adolescence you can think about thinking and you can fantasize, that's a normal process for an adolescent. And adolescent males particularly, armies were made out of adolescent males for centuries and centuries. Alexander the Great conquered half the world with a group of adolescent males.
That kind of gives you hope.
Yeah, there's great hope in there, and they can march forever and be hungry forever, and they have an enormous amount of wonderful energy. It is how that is dealt with, I think, in our society that is a problem, in my opinion. And video games play a part of that. Not getting good mental illness, not having any outlets. We cut sports programs, for example. I think that that's insane. When that's the best place for them to be. Do you agree?
Sure. Well, this is really fun because I get to defend the male gender here in this discussion.
I'm not attacking the male gender.
I love it. I think what you're bringing up is a very important aspect of this. And when you're looking at something so large that we're dealing with as a society, we have to look at the dynamics. And we've known for years that suicide completions are more by young men, or by men, by the way, not just young men, than there are females.
Actually, old men.
Yeah, old men today. It really has changed over the years. And the access to weapons and use of weapons and whatever has been something that men have traditionally had more access to, than women have. We know that. We also know that the approach that you take to everyone when you provide care has to really be individualized. And individualizing to men is something that's different. And if you can get on your websites if you like and look at man therapy. Just go on and look at mantherapy.com.
I just saw a billboard for that somewhere.
And it was really, it's an attempt by people working in the area of suicide prevention to say, this is sort of how men see it. Now, I don't like to stereotype everybody into one category, but I just think it gives you somewhat of a sense on how to approach this somewhat differently. But again, I just want to warn us that I really believe that we've got to get and I don't want to quote the governor because I won't do it as well as he did by any means, but it is how do we get the right services to in the right ways, the right amount at the right time. And I think we've talked about that somewhat today in a lot of different ways, and focus on the correct things.
And I'm not attacking young men.
Oh,
I'm
no.
really pleading for them. I am saying
thank you.
They need something different from us than what we've been providing for them.
And we really are in a position that we have underfunded and underconsidered this area of healthcare for years and years and years. And we must address this. We can't let these circumstances that have happened and we get all excited about, and then we decide, oh boy, now's not time to do something about it. We need to look at healthcare. Behavioral health, mental health, and substance abuse is part of that. How do we include it all of healthcare? How do we address this and get it up at the same level as we do other areas of healthcare and deal with it?
Well, clearly we are in for a new kind of journey on all of this in Colorado and across the nation. And that is Colorado State of Mind for this week. You can see this program again at video.rmpbs.org. We thank Dr. Hildegard Messenbaugh and George DelGrosso for their insights tonight. And another programming note, tomorrow Rocky Mountain PBS presents a 3-hour national program titled What's Next After Newtown? What Our Country and Communities Can Do. It covers a range of issues, including violence in the media, accessibility of weapons, school security, mental illness, and what science knows about the mind of a killer. You can see it here tomorrow from 1 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Thank you for tuning to Colorado State of Mind tonight. Next week, we'll be talking about women and leadership. I'm Cynthia Hessin. Good night.
If we look at an undercurrent of what's happening with young women right now, it's really scary. Our prison system is continuing to increase with the number of women who are in the prison system, and a lot of, more violent behavior. I'm not trying to let guys off the hook. I'm just saying we've got a real problem.
The society
Women
itself.
My personal opinion is it has to do with the value of a human life.